You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 128, Speaking Dogri. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast and conversation with multilinguals. Today, we're learning a ton about the Dogri language with linguist and educator Dr. Devina Krishna. When I tell you I was pumped to learn about Dogri, and Dr. Krishna did not disappoint. In this conversation, we talk about how the Dogri language was once considered a dialect of Punjabi, but now recently seen as a language independent of Punjabi. Dr. Krishna breaks down the grammar of Dogri, and I'm so excited to learn about the tonal quality of the language. We even note in the episode that now that Dogri is classified as its own language, it's one of only 2 tonal Indian languages. So exciting! While we're taking this deep dive on tonality, Dr. Krishna also shows us how they relate tonality in songs and folktales. And you know that we love songs and folktales. She also tells us about the Dogri to English dictionary that she created, and she tells us how linguists are able to take steps like this to preserve linguistic data to keep a language from vanishing. Many thanks to Dr. Krishna for sharing your language and culture with all of us. If you enjoy episodes of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, and like and subscribe on YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. And if you've been a longtime listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now pledge ongoing support for the show on buymeacoffee.com or on patreon.com. Special shout out to Speaking Tongues recent supporters and patrons Heidi L, Linnea H, Pat N, and Yari A. For just $5 a month, you'll have access to excerpts of this conversation that did not make it to the full published episode. And as you know, I wrote a book. My food zine of International Language and Cuisine Taste Buds Volume 1 is available now for purchase. Check social media for the sneak peek inside the book, and make sure that you purchase one for yourself and one for your friends. Links to all platforms are in the show notes. Okay, let's chat. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here with Dr. Devina Krishna. How are you today, Dr. Krishna?
Yes, I'm good, Ellie, and thank you so much for this warm invitation.
I'm very excited to welcome you and to talk about your work, to talk about your languages. And I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
So, I'm Dr. Devina Krishna, academic and linguist. I teach linguistics as an assistant professor at Patna Women's College. I earned my PhD in linguistics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India, specializing in phonetics and phonology. And my main research interests revolve around phonetics, phonology, and language documentation. As far as the first language is concerned, my first language has been Hindi, and I have learned to speak English and Sanskrit. Of course, my mother's mother language is Dogri, and I'm familiar with Dogri. And when I was doing my MPhil program and PhD program in JNU, then I worked in Dogri, on Dogri language. So, as far as Dogri is concerned, it belongs to the new Indo-Aryan branch of Indo-European family, and it's chiefly spoken in the Jammu region of Jammu and Kashmir, northern Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, and other parts of Kashmir. From my childhood, I acquired Hindi as that was the native language spoken within my family. And as we know that, the mother language, if the child really receives, a very rich home language environment, then it helps the child to develop his or her language and cognitive skills. So Hindi was my mother tongue. But yes, I'm familiar with Dogri as well.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Tell, tell me about how that dynamic was when you were, you're growing up speaking Hindi, but then you're also familiar with Dogri. And I know in India there are so many languages spoken. So what was
Absolutely.
communication like? What was communication like, and what languages, I guess, did you hear around you, or did you
Yeah.
hear, in your community?
Yes. So, actually, there's this whole, idea of using a language according to the domain. So, India is a hub of so many languages. There are like so many languages, and every state has its own regional language also. So, the place where I reside in the eastern part of India, that's the Bihar region. So, there I was used to speaking Hindi. And of course, there are other varieties also. So, like we have Bhojpuri, we have Maghi here, we have Methli. So many languages are there. So, I used to converse in Hindi, and of course, at school, I used to converse in English. So, I was actually using language according to the domain. So, if I'm in a marketplace, so if there's a vegetable seller, so I am mostly conversing in Hindi because the person knows Hindi, as a language. So it was just, I was changing language according to the domain.
Mm, I see. And you said that you were living in Bihar.
Yes.
Is now I've talked about Hindi before, specifically with the guest who was living in Bihar, and
All right.
I would love to know how Hindi in Bihar, how it stands out from Hindi spoken in neighboring regions of India.
Yes.
Are there differences? Are there things that make it, special to you?
Yeah, exactly. See, what happens is like in the present context, the kind of language we speak. So there's a lot of mixing taking place. There's a lot of dilution in the language also. Like there's nothing existing as a pure language. So the kind of Hindi, that's a very basic Hindi people speak. Okay, and most of the people, they're switching, like if there's a person whose mother tongue is, for example, Bhojpuri or Methli or Bajika, so due to certain factors, it might be migration or any other factor, people are actually, they're switching from, speaking their mother tongues, and they mostly, converse in Hindi, which is a very basic form of Hindi. Okay.
Hmm.
So yes, we have here, but yes, language influences the other codes. So we can say that these regional varieties are influencing Hindi. So we have a Bihari Hindi also. So that is what is happening. Okay, the kind of, we can say, language due to various codes coming into contact with each other, another code is coming up. So that's the case over here.
I see. That's really
Yes.
interesting. I'm so fascinated by how language is expressed in India
Yes,
because
I
there's,
also feel right that this whole field of linguistics itself is so exciting and amazing.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And I'm like, it must be so, you must never have a boring day studying linguistics
Yeah,
in
it's
India
it's
because there's
that's
so
why
much.
exactly, because that's why I chose this field, because it's so challenging. It's full of challenges. Analyzing language at various linguistic levels. It's a challenge and it's exciting at the same time.
Yeah, I bet. Oh, that's so exciting. Um, so tell us about Dogri and tell
Yeah.
us, so I want to know, so as you're talking, I'm looking on a map and you said it's spoken in Kashmir?
Yeah, I'll just give you a brief introduction about Dogri.
Right.
So it is an Indo-Aryan language, and it is
Mm-hmm.
spoken by around 2.6 million people in India. And the regions are, it basically is chiefly spoken in the Jammu region of Jammu and Kashmir, but
Mm.
also in northern Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, and other parts of Jammu and Kashmir and elsewhere.
Okay.
And these Dogri speakers are called Dogras, and the Dogri speaking region is called Duggar. Okay, that's the term.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dogri is a member of the Western Pahari group of languages, and the language is referred to as Pahari in Pakistan and Pakistani administered parts of Kashmir. And it is also one of the several varieties of the Punjabi group of languages. Many people say that it is a dialect of Punjabi language.
Hmm.
And it was only recently that the language received official status in the country. So, based on the unanimous recommendation of a panel of linguists from the General Council of the Sahitya Academy of Delhi, the language came to be recognized as an independent modern literary language of India.
Okay.
And this was hailed as a national language of India in the Indian Constitution.
You said recently. How recently was it recognized?
Yeah, a few years back. Few years back. Yeah, so we have various linguists like John Beams. He said that Dogri is, it's actually in the group of 11 Indian languages, and we have Grierson, for example, the linguist, who in his Linguistic Survey of India, Volume 9, said that Dogri is regarded as a variety of Punjabi. So it is structurally an autonomous language. And some people said that it is not a dialect of any other language. So these were different views. But yes, the good thing is that the language has been included in the eighth schedule of the Constitution.
Hmm. Now, with this comparison to Punjabi, what about Dogri and what about the language itself is drawing this comparison to Punjabi? Is it the structure of the language? Is it the sound? Is
Yeah,
it the
yeah,
vocabulary?
right, right. See, we know that whether it is Punjabi or whether it is Dogri, they belong to the Indo-Aryan language family. Because in India, we have so many language families, and these languages belong to the Indo-Aryan language family. Now, Punjabi also has I'll just talk about the word order, for example. So it has the same word order like SOV. We have a subject, we have an object, and we have a verb. And same thing follows in Dogri also. We have a subject, we have an object, we have a verb. Most of the lexical words, most of the vocabulary terms, it's also similar. So some of these words are also similar. So I'll also later, in the later part, when I'm discussing about the lexical tones, I'll also give some similar examples from Dogri and Punjabi also. So that's the reason that there's a lot of similarity between the two. So that's why people say that Dogri is a dialect of Punjabi. But yes, now it is considered completely different. And yes, there are variations. There are variations at various levels. Although there is some similarity because, in the same region, people are living and some are speaking Punjabi, some are speaking Dogri. So languages influencing each other. But yes, we can say that at the various linguistic levels, there are differences also to be found.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into that. Tell me about how we're forming sentences. Tell me, is the language gendered? Is it
Yeah,
agglutinative? Is it
yeah,
tonal? Are there
yes,
cases?
yes, 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 absolutely. So, of course, Dogri grammar is similar to that of Indo-Aryan languages, as I said, and it is, of course, agglutinative language because it is adding suffixes to roots to build words and to express grammatical relations. And of course, whereas as far as the Dogri nouns are concerned, they are marked for the following grammatical categories. We have number, where we have singular and plural, just like in Hindi we have. And we have gender. We have, of course, it's a gendered language. We have masculine and feminine gender. We have cases also there. We have nominative, genitive, accusative, instrumental, ablative, locative, vocative cases. We have even adjectives that agree with the nouns they modify in gender, number, and case. We have verbs agreeing with their subjects in active voice, or with their objects in passive voice in person, number, and gender. So interestingly, there are three persons also: first, second, then we have a second honorific, and third. And we have two aspects, imperfective and perfective. We have three tenses, we have three moods, we have two voices, active and passive. So it is, the grammatical, as far as the grammatical structure is concerned, it is similar to, languages of Indo-Aryan language family. And
Mhm.
we have, interestingly, all these, these vocabulary words, the list of words, they are actually, derived from Sanskrit.
Okay.
And this kind, yes, Sanskrit. It's as we know that Sanskrit is the mother of all these languages. So
Hmm.
we'll find that these words have been derived from Sanskrit, and it's the Devanagari script in present day times which Dogri people follow to write. Historically, that was written in Dogra variant of the Takri script, but present day Dogri is written in Devanagari script. So there's something very interesting I would like to share. So, you know, in linguistics, we have a level called morphology, where we actually analyze the internal structure of words. And when we analyze the internal structure of words, we also have at the same time, we also, try to study the various word formation processes that are involved in, the formation of words. So we have a very major word formation process that's called reduplication. And it's a very important phenomena of word formation process. Typically, in the Indian subcontinent, we'll find lots of languages and they have word formation process, and reduplication is one among them. So what happens in reduplication? There's a base form and there's an iterated form.
Okay.
That means a duplicated form. So like in Dogri, we'll say tola tola. Okay, so the Dogri sentence is Jagat tola tola aya. That means the boy uh, came very quickly. Now this is a repetition. It's a complete reduplication. Tola tola. Similarly, when it comes to a girl, we'll say kudi toli toli awa kardi hi. That's a past tense sentence. That means the girl came quickly. Uh, so the point is that this whole idea of reduplication is also noticeable in this language.
Mm.
Yes. I just thought to, include this since I was talking about the grammar. So I just thought that I'll talk about a little bit about the word formation process. And reduplication is one of my favorite areas. So I just thought to include that.
I love reduplication. I think it's
Yes.
so cute. It's adorable.
Yeah, exactly. And
And
then
I,
since India has so many languages, so I think in all of these languages we have cases of reduplication. But the interesting is to find out what kinds of, what are the different categories of reduplication existing, because we
mhm.
have different categories also.
So I just wonder in the examples that you gave and the reduplication that we see in that sentence, is that
Yeah,
indicating that the action was done quickly?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The first reduplicative sentence was Jagat tola tola aya. That means this tola tola means quickly, very quickly.
Very quickly. Okay. I love that. Now,
Yeah.
how else is reduplication used? Is it only used to it's used only to intensify?
Yeah, it is used for mostly, yes. Now, in this sense, it is actually serving to, intensify, right?
I like that.
This was the example I gave you for complete reduplication. We also have something called partial reduplication,
Okay.
and there we have, like, for example, in Hindi we say roti voti. That means bread and thing. Okay, when we say roti voti, it's bread and thing. So similarly, in Dogri also we have roti shutti. That means bread and thing. That's the Indian bread. The roti is the Indian bread. So even we have cases of, we can say, partial reduplication as well in this language.
I love that. That's so cute. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's the whole richness of a language, you'll find at various levels. And that's what the next, I know that you must be, you must be inquisitive to ask me about the lexical tones on which my whole work has been, based. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I would love to know about tones and especially that Dogri is written in the Devanagari script. Like
Yes.
how, okay, so the first thing is I want to know about tones as they're spoken, but then, my second part of that question is how do we indicate these tones in writing? And
Yes.
yeah, I know you have all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah, so when I, decided to work in this area of lexical tones, that time when I was actually reviewing the literature, so I found that it was actually mentioned that Punjabi is the only tonal language as far as the Indian subcontinent is concerned. So I thought that I had read, some other existing literature that time based on Dogri. So I found that. People had assumed that there are tones in Dogri. So I decided to carry this study forward. And then I decided to, since my work was totally software based analysis. So I went to field, I went to parts of Jammu, I collected data, and gladly I could find tones. So, yes, the language has tonal distinctions. It makes a tripartite tonal distinctions. There are three tones that I found, and there is one which is a contour tone. A contour tone is one where a particular tone starts in a particular manner, and then there's a glide. It takes a glide. So I found a falling rising tone that was a contour tone. Then I found a mid tone, and I found a low tone. Now,
Mm,
how to, yes, how to actually, uh, put this whole thing in writing. So we have certain, diacritic markings for that. Like for falling tone, we have one, you can say, a symbol that is being, being given. And similarly for mid-tone also we have a symbol, and for low tone also we have a symbol. So we use those symbols, and those symbols denote the tone. So for example, in Dogri, we have a word like P. Okay. So when I say P, now this P means again. Okay. And what is happening? The tone actually first takes a falling pattern, and then it rises.
mm,
Then in the second P, there's another P, which is said at, which is, I can say that there is no fall, there is no rise, but it is said at a mid pitch. So it's P. So that means grind. So as soon as I change the pitch, the meaning changes. And then we have the third P, which is said at a very low tone. So that's a very low tone. It's simply P, that means drink. So we have the same forms P, 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 but the only point is that the pitch is changing, and as we are changing the pitch, the meaning changes.
mm-hmm.
So now how did I prove this? I also worked in a software called Prat, or that's a speech software, and I had recorded the files, and then I studied all these words, and I could found that yes, maybe there are certain parameters through which we can find whether there are tones existing or not. So I checked the duration of the vowel. So in case of the first uh, vowel, where it was a contour, the vowel, the duration got very long. So it was naturally showing that the vowel is long, and it also showed the pattern also, how there was the pitch was first falling and then rising. Then in the second instance also, where there was a mid-tone, the software was showing the pattern. And then in the third also, the software was showing the low tone pattern. So it was also proved through the acoustic investigation that I carried. So uh, this is about tones, lexical tones that are there in the language. And we have other forms also, like other than P, we have coda. The coda means horse. Again, there's a fall rise pitch. Then we have coda, that means leper, that is said with a mid tone. And then we have coda, that is said in a low pitch, that means whip. So we have
Mm,
again, the forms are same, but the pitch is changing. And as the pitch is changing, the meaning changes. So these
mm-hmm.
are clear indications that Dogri is a tonal language, and the study firmly established with the technological aid the fact that Dogri is a tonal language amongst the languages of Indo-Aryan origin in India besides Punjabi.
Wow. I wonder, is the tonality in Dogri part of the reason why people thought that Dogri was a variety of Punjabi?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, and this whole idea of tonogenesis, that means how have these tones arrived? So
mhm,
tone has emerged at the expense of voicing and aspiration of obstruents. What
mhm.
happens is, so if the word was ghoda, so the aspiration got lost, and the gird, which was an obstruent, there was this, the it was a voiced consonant, g, and that just became voiceless. So people assume that this voicelessness came, it became coda, and all this, the voicing got lost, the aspiration got lost, and that led to the arrival of, or birth of tone.
When you're listening to Punjabi and when you're listening to Dogri, as much as I don't really want
Yeah.
to compare, I don't really like to compare, but I'm really curious to know, like, do you notice do you notice a similar tonality between both of the languages, or has Dogri are the tonal patterns different in Dogri than they are in Punjabi?
Yeah. Yeah. So, as I told you that the earlier literature that I had read, so there it was mentioned we had the same examples of coda, horse, and coda, leper, coda, whip. We had the same example in Punjabi, but yes, the tones were little different. The kind of analysis I got was slightly different from the earlier works that I have read. So maybe, sometimes what happens, the mid tone, what I'm thinking of as a mid tone might be low tone for someone. So, of course, or there might be some allotones also. So it just depends upon one's investigation. What I found, I could found a contour, and I could found two steady tones also. But yes, there was some, in some way or the other, like the falling rising tone is almost similar like the Punjabi. But yes, there might be some variation as far as the mid and the low tones are concerned.
I'd love to know. Now, you mentioned that Dogri, there are variations within Dogri,
Yeah.
in Jammu and Kashmir and surrounding areas. But I'm curious now that we're talking about tones, are there changes in tonality throughout the region where Dogri is spoken, or does that stay the same?
Yeah, so there's this place in near Jammu that's called Basoli, and that is my mother's birthplace. So I remember when I went there, I collected most of my data from there, and even I went to the proper Jammu region. I collected data from there. So, but I couldn't find a lot of similarity. It is almost similar, but yes, when if I compare a person living in parts of Himachal Pradesh, for example, so his or her Dogri might show some variation as far as the Jammu Dogri is concerned. So there might be cases of little variation, but yes, of course, I think that needs to be studied. I haven't done that study, where I can compare the Himachal variety with the Jammu variety, because
Mhm.
mine was totally based on the Jammu region. But yes, that is something to be studied, and that will be an interesting thing to study further. Are there any variations, or there's similarity, or there's homogeneity?
Yeah, and this is interesting for me as well because I didn't realize that, or maybe I knew and forgot that
Yeah.
Punjabi is the, well, considered, well, like you said, it was considered the only tonal language in
Yes.
India. And
Yes.
like I'm fascinated with that because first of all, I'm just fascinated with Indian languages, period. Like full stop. I think that
Yeah.
they are amazing and there's just so much to know and so much to learn and it's so rich with history and culture and all the stuff that I love. So I think that having Dogri be the other one, be the second one, and have it be, recognized, I think is a really big deal.
Yeah.
This is amazing. This is such a big deal, bigger deal than I even realized and I recognized. And I feel like I'm going to tell you, I think why I'm so fascinated with, with Indian languages because I think, I'm in New York City, so I live in the US, and I
Yeah,
think that, obviously there are many South Asian people living in the US, and I love I love their communities and have so much respect for their communities. And I think
yeah,
that me, obviously not being South Indian myself, and I think of the perception that we get often of India, um, of Bangladesh, of Pakistan and Sri Lanka, etc. And I think that
yeah,
we get a vision that is very monolithic. And I think
exactly.
that, at least when I was growing up and, when I would think of India, I only had like one thing in mind, and that was actually, can you guess what it was? Do you want to take a guess?
You had one thing in mind. Oh my God. That is something you have to tell me.
I will tell you, the Taj
Yeah.
Mahal.
Oh my God.
The Taj
Oh,
Mahal, right?
yeah.
And when I think about myself 20 years ago, and this is what I would think when I think of India, I'm ashamed because it's like, okay, I know it's a wonder of the world and it was a magnum opus, but it's just one
Yeah.
thing of billions of things to know and
Yeah.
understand about India. And I love the vastness of it. And I think it's so interesting. And I'm so grateful to be able to have these conversations, talk to someone like you who can give me more insight and give my audience more insight and more perspective on, the parts of India that, we don't get to see in the US.
Yeah. That's
Um,
my absolute pleasure.
the
Yeah.
pleasure is mine. Trust me, believe me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else about Dogri that maybe we didn't get to mention and you think, we should also talk about, or anything else you'd want to talk about?
Other than that, the next thing I want to discuss is, this whole idea of folk tales.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd love to know about folk tales. I love a folk tale. I love a language that's rich with folk tales.
Yes.
Um, tell us about tell us about some of the folk tales that we hear in Dogri, and what are some common themes that we encounter?
Yes. So, yeah, right. So, Dogri has a rich oral literature, and folktales form an extensive part of it. Now, a lot of themes can be found in this language, ranging from mystery, adventure, to humor, satire, social and domestic problems. Now, despite these myriad variety of themes, what I found that Dogri has an element of musicality and rhythm in narrative techniques within its folk tales. Now, I even wrote a work discussing how the storytellers they use the element of musicality in their storytelling techniques to ease the children and other listeners, and then to create a zone of comfort and entertainment in front of them. So yes, when we talk about these folk tales, these folk tales are narrated using a sing-song variety of Dogri with special emphasis on even the use of reduplicates and musical onomatopoeias to lend a sense of musicality and rhythm in the language. So as we archive the Dogra oral history through the folk tales, which are meditative in nature, there are a lot of stories from all genres from Dogri literature, and let's if we talk about some of these Dogri folk tales.
Hmm.
Yes, there are some very interesting folk tales. I'll just like to narrate one. So we have a popular folk tale entitled Gunguru Pawai Ailak Tunu Tunu. Okay, so I'll just tell you the folk tale, and I'll just tell you how this whole there's this whole element of musicality in it. So this is a story of a bird. So what happens one fine day? A person sees a bird that has eaten the leaves of a plant from his land, and he was infuriated, and he decided to punish the bird by taking it to the king for retribution, even though the bird was lame and unable to fly properly. Now, on the way to the king, they encountered a man on horse-driven carriage. So the carriage driver felt pity for the bird and told that the man that the bird the he told the man that the bird was poor and helpless, and the bird then said to the horse. Now there's this whole, the bird is talking to the horse, and it is, the bird, the way the bird is saying, there's this whole, it's like a singing thing.
Mm.
So the bird sings like this. Kode aale aaye tak tunu tunu, subbe chidiya aiya tak tunu tunu, lambi chidi pakdoi tak tunu tunu, bacche mere aale tak tunu tunu. Now you know what happens. Like the bird is, actually talking to the horse, and the way these storytellers narrate, they use this sing song variety, and the bird is telling the horse that her condition is not fine, and then there's it's expecting the horse to show some sympathy.
Mm.
Now it was a sad story, and then what happens, nonetheless, the man was intent on getting the king to punish the birds, so he carried on with his journey and finally approaches the king to tell him the story of the bird. So the king listened to the story intently, but was sympathetic to the bird and its plights. And contrary to what the man was expecting, the king who punished the man, and the poor bird was allowed to go free. Okay, so this is how, the storyteller narrates the story. So this is the culture, we can say. It's like a song. So the story is, actually narrated in the form of a song. The song is sung in between the story, but eventually becomes an integral part of it. So this is a whole beauty, combining music with Dogri folk tales. That is something which excites the listener, especially children who
Yeah.
become intimately involved with the tale.
Well, I'm excited and thank you for singing that. Thank you for
Yeah,
singing that
actually,
bit.
I tell you how people do it. This is how people do, and I still have instances within my family. There are people in my family who still narrate, in this manner to their children. So that is something, what happens. The children, they really get involved with the tale. That's the whole, beauty of it. So
Hmm.
the combination of the story along with the song that elicits empathy, thereby, making the listeners use their hearts and not just their minds, right?
Right. Are the tales are the tales primarily for children or are they also for adults?
See, primarily they are being narrated for the children, but I've seen that even the adults listen to it. And of course, yeah, the adults are involved in singing these folk tales. But then, yeah, mostly it is those are being narrated to children who really enjoy listening to these stories.
Hmm.
And yeah, and the simple technique used by these storytellers to tell a part of a story, to sing a song, or tell more of the story and then sing another song, aids in weaving the song and the story together. So it's a blend of a story and a song. So I know that this is not just unique to Dogri. There might be other languages also where this technique is being used, but then through a lot of repetition, the songs included in stories, they are often picked up by the audience, and these musical elements create experiences which I feel they are more powerful and meaningful than regular storytelling.
This is really, really cool. I think this is really cool. Are the stories that so the story that you told and I guess other stories,
Yeah.
are they mainly for entertainment? Are they also stories to teach a lesson? Are they more like fables or is
Exactly.
there a mix?
Yeah. So, as I said, that these musical elements create experiences that are powerful and meaningful. And of course, every story has some lesson. There is some lesson at the end. The children can learn those lessons, and they're being told so that they can learn something. Okay. So, but there are so many stories. So, every story has some lesson in the end. And but yes, the point is that when these stories are incorporated with elements of musicality, that not only just makes the entire thing musical but also makes it interesting.
Mm.
apart from retaining the attention of children. So they enjoy and they learn a lesson also.
Where can where can we hear these stories? Do children have to go to like a gathering place to hear them? Or are they passed down through
Yeah.
families? Or like how does it work?
Yeah, these are actually, narrated within their homes, also within their home environment. So they actually receive these stories at the home environment only. And I mean, the grandmothers are there, the elderly people are there, the mothers are there, the caregivers are there. So they are actually involved in this effective storytelling, which is so rhythmic. So
Mm.
this is completely a rhythmic storytelling technique, that is being applied to make the images in the mind of the listeners engaging. Other than that, there's rhythm also, and rhythm has a lot of we know that rhythm has a lot of power, and when
Mhm.
that is applied to storytelling, that can also have a major impact on the story and its receivers. So these folk tales incorporate the elements of musicality and rhythm into their narrative techniques.
Like I remember being read stories when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I don't remember being told stories as a kid, which is not an indictment of my parents. It's just, I think, a cultural difference. And
Exactly.
I wonder how much richer as a child you can imagine a story when it's being told to you versus when you can see a book that's illustrated.
Yes. Absolutely. And this is the reason my son, when I narrated him the story, I mean, he also started taking interest. So I think this whole element of musicality is so engaging to our senses. The more senses stimulated by a story, the more people will not only relate to the story, but they also get moved by it.
Mhm.
So, it's the ultimate achievement of incorporating musicality. And that is what, people, or I should say that, in other words, by incorporating musicality, the story's message can be internalized by listeners. We know that music has is therapeutic. It is known for its mood altering qualities and its ability to affect behaviors. So as music triggers human senses and has a significant impact on human sensibilities, so music provides the opportunity for storytellers to tell the stories in different ways. So
Mm.
this is an art, and the art and power of storytelling is all about immersing the audience in the story and touching them emotionally. So this whole element of musicality aids and enhances the storytelling process, and of
Yeah.
course, children enjoy it.
Absolutely. I enjoy storytelling and I think it took me a while. I think now, as an adult, I enjoy it a lot and I actually crave it. And
Yeah.
I crave a well-told story. And
Yeah.
personally, I'm trying to get better and trying to become a better storyteller myself. And it's
Mm.
it's an uphill journey, but I really appreciate it. And I love that it's such an integral part of the culture. I'm curious to know, are there, because we're talking about the musicality of it, are there any instruments that are played alongside storytellers?
There is no need of instruments. No, the instruments are not being played, but they, simply, as far as the current situation, I'll just talk about the contemporary time. So, I think the there is simple narration, and the person who is a storyteller, he or she simply narrates using these two elements of musicality and rhythm. So there's a simple narration, and as I told you, there's a blend of song and story. So that just makes it interesting.
Mm, okay. I
Yeah.
was really thinking to ask you also about like songs and movies and that, if we see any of that, but I want to hear about folk songs first.
Yeah.
Um
So as I said, that we're talking about music, and uh, you know uh, there are Dogra folk songs, and there's a lot of importance of music in the Dogra life. So music, we know that it plays an important role in human life, and people feel refreshed when they listen to music. And of course, culture plays an important role in human life, and folk songs are part of culture. So, folk songs of Duggar or Dogra are a rich store of folk culture and thought. And the they are like, there are various themes. So these songs are actually played on various situations and various contexts. So we have folk arts, folk dances, folk literature, and that has been transmitted orally from one generation to another. So we have also, folk songs. We have a very famous folk song like Pala Sipaya Dogriya. So that is also a very famous folk song. That is, and the interesting thing is that some important occasions the song is being played. So that is actually, sung in the memory of a soldier. Okay, the woman is singing the song in the memory of a soldier, and of course, the beauty is that uh, although the song is quite old, but then even in the present context, we find that it is still being played, and that's the whole idea. So we can there's this whole sense of preservation of culture. This just brings me to the point of preserving culture, linguistic diversity. Now, we living in a setup, a multilingual setup, where there is linguistic diversity, or let's say multilingualism or cultural diversity. So if we preserve our culture, we are preserving the diversity of our nation. And this whole thing fascinates me. I feel happy to know that how these folk songs, these folk stories are still existing. And this is what is actually helping us in preserving our linguistic diversity also. Because what I feel that if we don't, speak our language, we don't actually incorporate the use of these folk songs, folk tales in our day-to-day life. If we don't use them, then in some way or the other, these will not exist. So, in
Mm.
order to make the culture alive, in order to preserve the cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, we must make efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a folk tale or folk song that you heard growing up that has become your favorite?
Yes, as I narrated the folk tales, I've been listening to those, folk tales, all these folk tales at my among my family members, the
Mm.
one I narrated to you, and we have some other folk tales also. So the one I narrated to you is one of my favorite, because why it is my favorite, because not only there's this whole idea of musicality and the way it is narrated, that's interesting, but other than that, there's a very there's a it is ending with a good lesson. Now,
Mhm.
the poor bird, the bird was innocent, and that is why it was allowed to go. And the person who was extremely greedy was being punished. And this is what happened. So all these folk tales, they actually end with what we call a lesson. Okay, there's some lesson at the end, and that's something which just makes it so fascinating. Because what I feel, that in the present day times, when we are actually living in the technologically driven world, people are glued to their smartphones, smart devices. There is no time for personal interactions. We are
Mhm.
missing that. So I think this is one way, getting to your roots, and finding about your roots, finding about the interesting aspects of your culture. There's a kind of shift that you're actually, diverting from the present scenario, and you're getting into your roots. So that is something, the need of the hour, what I feel. So this is what I tell my son also, that you must know your roots also. Not only playing games on smartphone is good enough, but then you should also look at the cultural aspects also. it's important to acquaint the children. So I think we should not say that, these are old methods, okay, or folk tales and all these things. But I think we should try to make some balance. I think we can incorporate them in our day-to-day life as well.
Yeah. This is really fascinating. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you had so much to share and to
Yeah,
tell
and
us about it.
this is the whole. I think being diverse has its own advantages. This is the whole beauty of diversity. There's so many things one can explore, whether it is the cuisine, whether it's the language, whether it's any other aspect related to the any cultural aspect, or for that matter. So there's so much to explore. Yeah.
Yeah. You told me that you created a bilingual dictionary
Yes. Yes.
with Dogri and English. And I think that is such an incredible feat. So, firstly, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And I would love to know, as someone who loves dictionaries, what what kind of
Yeah.
considerations did you have to make to
Yeah.
complete such a grand project? And, what was the process like? And
Yeah.
how is this resource being used?
Yeah, so that was my MPhil program in JNU. So in one of the courses titled Language Documentation, so I compiled a dictionary of Dogri English containing commonly used lexical items. So it was around 1,000 words. Now this was with the help of Toolbox, that was a software. And the dictionary was created using the software Toolbox. And Toolbox is a data management and analysis tool for field linguists. So it is used for maintaining lexical data and for parsing and interlinearizing text. And it is free to download and use. So what happens when you actually download the software? You have to enter the lexical word. You have to it shows like that. It has its own structure. So there you have to enter the lexical word, then you have to enter the parts of speech. You put the gloss, okay, and
Mm,
you put the definition. So I remember that I create the lexemes in Dogri via Toolbox. So it was all done in an alphabetical manner, and I had inserted pictures also. So for example, the Dogri word koda, okay, koda means horse. So I inserted a lexeme koda, so I can use the phonetic fonts over there. And then I inserted the part of speech, that is noun. And then I gave the description that it is a large animal, uh, which people can write. And then after that, I even inserted a sentence in Dogri, and then I gave I gave the gloss.
mm,
So that is how it was compiled. So I think it was around more than 1,000 words that I actually it was a very difficult task initially, but then gradually I learned it, and yes, it was being made, and that was being documented. And those days we had compact discs, so it was even documented in those CDs, and then that was actually submitted in the university, so that the future researchers can make use of the data. So it was a kind of documentation. And the point was that since India is facing, language endangerment issues, so linguists are actually working hard to document these languages, which are, in some way or the other, in a vulnerable state or facing some levels of endangerment. So that was the whole idea, to introduce the course of language documentation to acquaint students with the toolbox software, and to, of course, create data, to preserve data, so that that can be used for posterity or future generations.
mhm. I know
Yeah.
that I know that, English is India is an English speaking country, and I'm curious to know what was behind the decision to make it from Dogri to English and not like Dogri to another Indian language.
Yeah. So it could have been a trilingual dictionary also, but since it was the initial stage, so we were being taught to start with the bilingual thing. So so we there was this opposition, put like, keeping one of your mother tongues, and then you can just put English, you can have English translation of it. So that was, just an introductory course, and then that's why we just started with, this whole idea of creating a bilingual. But then I always think that I should take that work further and, create a trilingual where we can have, other than, the native language, we can have Hindi also there, and we can do a trilingual dictionary also. So that was just the initial thing. So that was, we, each of us, like all the students, they were supposed to choose their mother tongues along with English
I
for
see.
the translations, right?
Oh, okay. So is this dictionary available for, and is it available online for anyone, or is it just at the university?
So it's at the university for
Oh.
documentation. It's preserved there only. Yeah. But yes, interestingly, I have a hard copy of that with me. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just curious, I think about language resources.
Yeah.
And also going back to what I was saying earlier about, looking at India and looking at it as a monolith and not realizing how many languages are spoken. And, I'm thinking of maybe the, the Indian American family who's here and they are, Dogri speakers. Like, if they want to encourage their children to speak the language, like this is a resource that would be great for them, or anybody else who wants to learn the language.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that is the whole idea of language documentation. Since, this whole idea of endangerment is so crucial because, within endangerment also, there are so many levels.
Mm,
Okay. So, India is, of course, facing language endangerment, and there are so many levels. So, the only way one can, save it, like, for example, I'll tell you, there's something called definitely endangered, and there's something called critically endangerment. So, that is, there's a variation, and there are some languages who are in a vulnerable state, so they have not exactly reached the stage of, endangerment, but they have the potential, they might, reach that stage in future. So the endangerment level, they actually vary, okay, from language to language. And uh, instead of, uh, there are certain things we can do as linguists so we can preserve the data. So when we are being taught language documentation, the whole idea is to create resources, so that we can save the language from getting vanished.
mm,
Okay. So in some way or the other, we make efforts to preserve the language, and I think that's a very important task. And even I'm doing a project. I'm doing a very a very, it's a very minor project, but then it is. I'm actually working on the reduplicatives, or you can say reduplicated structures of. There are two languages which are actually vulnerable languages of the eastern part of India, and those are Angika and Bachika. So I'm also working on a project, and it gives me a lot of pleasure that I'm getting a chance to document the work through my efforts. So, and that's something, giving back to your community as well. So
yeah.
there's a sense of satisfaction along with some reward also.
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah,
It's exciting, not that the not that the languages are endangered, but it's exciting that you have the opportunity to work with them and give back. I think
exactly,
that's
exactly.
wonderful.
And my students are also working in that area. That's another interesting thing.
Yeah.
That they are also there to, to they're also finding out which languages are getting extinct, or other languages vulnerable, and
Mm,
how can we, what possible efforts can be done to save them. Yeah.
yeah. I would love for you to let our audience know, let us know, well, you've told us a bit about what you're currently working on, but if there's anything else you want to mention that you're working on, and let us know if anyone, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, let us know where we can find you
Yeah,
online or
sure.
on social media.
Yeah, so yes, I'm there on Facebook also, and I think I can give you my email ID also, so that can also be circulated. So if there are questions, I think I'll most appreciate that if they can mail me the questions. So I would love to answer those questions.
I will put it in the show notes for this episode so that people who are
Sure.
listening can get in touch with you right away.
Yeah, sure.
I'm so excited. I'm so happy that we had this conversation.
Yeah, and the whole point is that you made me feel so comfortable and you
Oh,
are taking so much of interest. There's so much to say, but then we have a limited time. So I think maybe later also sometime we can plan something else and we can discuss more on this. There's so many things
absolutely.
we can discuss all this. Yeah.
You definitely have to come back and have another conversation with me
Sure, I
because,
would love to. Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
Dr. Krishna, I know that it's getting late for you, so I want to wrap up.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
I want to thank you again for this lovely conversation. I learned so much in just talking to you in this short time, and I'm really grateful that, to have had the opportunity to talk with you.
This thank you is mutual. I must thank you because I just couldn't feel there was no pressure as such. It was such a relaxing and soothing environment. You made it so easy for me. So it was a perfect conversation. I really enjoyed every aspect of it.
Thank you so much. And I'm really just curious. So I thank you for indulging my curiosity and teaching me so many new things. And I'm glad you
Yeah,
felt comfortable and
very
so did
comfortable.
I.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I want this show to be. I just want it to be friendly. I don't, I don't want to drill anybody for the hard answers. Like it's just very, very casual. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I thank you again. And my final question that I ask at the end of every episode, and this is where I'm going to take an opportunity to try some Dogri language for myself. Do you
Okay.
have do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in
Yeah.
Dogri to share
Yeah.
and to teach
Yeah.
us?
Sure. Yeah, so there's a very famous proverb because proverbs have the quality of saying much in the fewest words, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something I heard from my mother and from my other relatives also. So it says, "Gilase da dudd, na main na tudd." Okay, that means the milk which is there in the glass, it is neither yours nor mine because somewhere or the other it will fall down. It happens na, at times, the milk in the glass, it just falls down due to some reason. So it's just like it's neither yours nor mine. So I want you to speak this.
Okay.
So I'll tell you and you just speak this. You say the first word is gilasse.
Gilase
Da
da
dudd
dod
na me
now now me
na tudd.
now me not to do.
Oh, it sounds so nice to hear from you.
So, okay, let's put it all together and I'll repeat after you.
So it's गिलासे da दुध na मैं na तुद.
Gilase da dod na
Yeah,
me not to do.
absolutely right. Yeah,
I like this proverb.
yeah,
So you said it meant the milk in the glass is neither yours nor mine.
yes,
I have to start collecting these because I've learned so much wisdom from all over the world from my guests.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for, well, first of all, thank you for teaching me that proverb, and hopefully our listeners are practicing along with me.
Yeah,
Um, Try to learn something new, try some new sounds, and it's
yeah,
always a pleasure to, to try a new language. So, This has been wonderful again. So I just want to ask you one more thing.
Yeah,
In a situation such as this one, where we have been talking for quite some time and we're in Jammu and we
yeah,
are about to go our separate ways,
yeah.
in Dogri, what is the best way to say goodbye?
Okay, that's Changave. We say Changave.
Chengave,
Yes,
Chengave, Dr. Krishna.
Changave.
Thank you again, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like ourselves. Ciao!